Tapestry plans and ploys, Metro X, and Super Skill Pinball 4K. This is Staying In.
This is a debate that has been raging in my house, and I brought it here for us to settle. Okay.
Okay, here we go again.
We've solved things such as where should eggs be kept. We've debated things such as what makes a sandwich, the bread or the filling.
Feeling pretty proud about that one, yeah.
So I want you all to close your eyes and imagine a Twix. Okay? If you don't know what a Twix is, it's made by the Mars Corporation, which is owned by Nestle, I think. And a Twix has comes in a finger, and you'll usually have like a crunchy base, a caramel top, and it's wrapped in chocolate. And you get 2 of them in a pack. Now, Peter.
Hello.
Is a Twix a biscuit or a chocolate bar? Quick fire. Come on, quick fire.
It let's be honest, it's a chocolate bar.
Kris.
Chocolate bar.
Dan.
Chocolate bar.
Well.
Okay, so Sam thinks it's a biscuit.
I'm sorry, raging?
Yeah, this has been the highlight of our last few weeks. So, yeah, I think it's a biscuit.
Well, you're wrong.
For this reason. Right,
Go
okay.
on. Yep.
Now close your eyes and conjure up a Cadbury's finger. Now, is a Cadbury's finger a biscuit or a chocolate bar? Peter.
It's a biscuit.
Kris.
Biscuit.
Dan.
It's a biscuit.
So, why does the addition of caramel suddenly make something a chocolate bar?
It's not about the addition of caramel.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No.
It's the entire components of 2 sticks of chocolate wrapped as a packet, as opposed to a box of many chocolate fingers. You're buying one Twix. You're not buying a pack of biscuits.
But you can buy individual Twixes. You can buy them in packs of 1. So is it then?
Yeah, but you can't really, and I'm not saying you
can.
But hang on, wait. Traditionally, and I'm not saying you can't do this because I know you're going to come back to me and say, oh, well, I saw this once. Traditionally, you wouldn't buy a solitary custard cream. You would buy a pack of custard creams.
That's true. Very
Doesn't
true.
mean that you couldn't, if you wanted to,
Waitrose.
you could buy a single custard cream. I'm sure there are coffee shops that sell single packaged custard creams.
Exactly. So when you're buying a Twix, you're buying a pack of biscuits.
No,
you would buy
you're
a
not.
pack of bourbons.
No, Sam.
No, Sam.
No.
So again, okay, here's another part. A caramel digestive, crunchy base, caramel top, chocolate on top of that. That's a biscuit. So how is that different to a Twix? If I put 2 of those together and wrap them up, suddenly that's a chocolate bar, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, a caramel digestive's twice baked. It's a biscuit, isn't it?
All right, Mr. McVitie.
I'm curious as to know how many people have so far gone along with your interpretation of what a Twix is. Has anyone agreed with you yet, Sam? Because I don't believe that we are the first people you've asked.
Don't say your infant son.
People do, but it's mainly just
appease you.
Appease. It's mainly acquiescence.
Is it after an hour of debate?
Yeah, it's mostly to sort of make you go away because you've accosted somebody in the street and you've handed them a flyer and said, but it is a biscuit though, isn't it?
And you handed them a chocolate finger and a Twix and said, how are they different?
How are they different? Sorry, sir, but you do need to leave Debenhams.
If you had a biscuit barrel, I don't have a biscuit barrel, but if you would you put Twixes in it?
Yes, the single ones. Yeah.
Single ones. This is so.
See, in that case, I wouldn't put them in there.
No, I wouldn't.
Even if there were single Twixes, they would remain in the cupboard. My biscuits, because I do have a biscuit tin, my biscuits go in the biscuit tin. The chocolate bars go in the cupboard.
Oh, come on! It's 2020. Why are we putting labels on all these things? So
you're the person
that's doing it.
You're the one.
You are.
So a penguin or a Tim Tam, if you're in Australia, biscuit or chocolate bar?
Biscuit.
Well, yeah, exactly. So why does elongate?
Sam, how often do you go out and buy a solitary penguin?
It's not necessarily that I believe wholeheartedly that a Twix is a biscuit. I'm more interested in why does a penguin being a biscuit if you elongate it and put a bit of caramel on, suddenly it's a chocolate bar. Like, what is it about its form that suddenly it just changes its substance, even though constituently they're both made up of the same sort of stuff?
Well,
Exactly.
I can tell you right now that Her Majesty's Revenues and Customs define it as a confectionery item and not a biscuit or even a chocolate-covered biscuit, which is treated differently for the purposes of tax.
My point was
There you
going to
go,
be,
then.
if when you go
Thank
to the
you.
shop, do you find a Twix in the biscuits or in the confectionery? You find Twixes in the confectionery.
Now, here's the thing. Supermarkets don't help with this because they're in the same aisle and they'll usually be at the intersection between the two.
Still belongs in the
I think
confectionery.
the supermarkets know. I think
Does the Twix sit
supermarkets
next to
know
a
that
Mars bar or does it sit next to a custard cream?
It's a blurry line.
Did I tell you about a teacher I knew years ago who didn't know really how to deal with crying students when they'd come into his office? So his tactic
Is that
was
a common occurrence?
sometimes it would happen. Like you get students in tears.
Yeah.
And what he would do is he'd give them a penguin and get them to read the joke.
That's a good glass of water then. What?
I mean, Sam, you weren't kidding because we have a WhatsApp group that's just for this podcast. When Sam said, "To be fair, what I'm bringing to the opening could last us the whole pod."
It's true. Yeah, it's true.
I'm willing to take this. When the inland revenue is on my side, I know I'm, on the right direction with this theory.
But you're not.
They're not.
You're not. They're not
just
on your
said-
side.
You just
They're
said
not.
for tax purposes, it's
So, Sam, inadvertently there, you have buried yourself by saying that you agree with whatever the
Yeah.
Inland Revenue Service say. And they go against you.
I'm agreeing with how Pete interpreted it, which is not
No,
necessarily
you're
exactly
agreeing with
right.
anybody who agrees with you.
No, what did the IRS say?
The HMRC
Oh yeah, of course, yes.
said. If we could all stand for the national anthem. They say that it is a confectionery and not a biscuit or a chocolate-covered biscuit. Both and all three of those are treated differently when it comes to
Okay, so it's not a
how they're
biscuit
taxed.
or a chocolate covered.
It's neither of those.
Do you know how they determine what is a biscuit and what is a cake?
Yes, I do. They leave it, don't they, Dan?
I think we've discussed this more than Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs.
It's been a while since I've talked about a Stonemaier game, and this is going to be a bit of a twofer, really. I've been very kindly sent a copy of an expansion called Tapestry, Plans and Ploys. It came out just recently, and it's an expansion for their game Tapestry, which came out last year. There are different types of expansions for board games. You get some which offer additional components and variants, so it's about playing the base game in different ways. They change the rules just to add a little bit of variety. So off the top of my head, I think of the Splendor expansion, Cities of Splendor, where it is literally just 4 different variants in the box. But there's other types of expansion which don't change really any of the rules of the base game. They're just adding more stuff, which creates more variety.
Or allows more people to play the game. So,
Yes, that's sometimes often the case, definitely. This is the second of those 3 things. So this is Plans and Ploys, which is basically more of what you like to add variety to the playing of the game. It's really for those people who have played a lot of Tapestry and they feel now that they've kind of already got a feel of the kind of the various different variable player powers and setups. And they kind of want a little bit more, really, but something that doesn't change the things they like in there. So this was designed by Jamie Stegmaier, with art by Andrew Bosley, and Ron Brown does sculpts. And one of the things that puts Tapestry on the map, really, like a lot of Stonemaier games, is the quality of the components. And I know we've spoken about Pendulum before, where we felt actually that wasn't best exemplified there. But this is your stereotypical Stonemaier game. We're talking linen finish player boards, a la Wingspan.
Yeah.
We're talking these chunky painted miniatures, which are these buildings which you put onto your little builder mat, and they're like Tetronimos at the base. So there's a little puzzle there in terms of how you arrange them on your board. And, when you cover certain pieces, certain amounts of them will give you bonuses and stuff. It's a civilization game. I've not had much experience of playing board game versions of civilization games. It's quite a lean one in comparison to lots of ones I hear, like through the ages. This clocks in at around 90 minutes to 2 hours playing time, which may seem like a lot for, your standard game, but for a Civ game, that's, it's erring on the kind of lighter side, really. So it's quite nice to scratch that itch in the same way that, like, the Battle of Polytopia, the mobile game we spoke about on an ages ago podcast, scratches that itch in a very frenetic, quick burst on a mobile phone. Spotlights on Civ games. So
the more you know.
So this is essentially where, imagine the four of us are playing, and we've each got, a bit like when we've been playing Civ 5 occasionally online, we're each in charge of a particular civilization. We start with nothing. So in this game, you start with basically humanity's learnt to make fire, and then you make certain choices on what's generally called tech trees. They're quite a common component. And what you picture with a tech tree is like a branching path of forks. And when you make certain choices, you're basically deciding what your civilization is going to focus on. So the way that this game works, Tapestry, is you have these 4 different advancement tracks that go around each side of the board. And as you have a playing piece on each side, and you have to make that decision to go, okay, which of the 4 am I going to use? Am I going to focus on science? Am I going to focus more on technology? Am I going to focus on military or exploration? There's no culture, which is a bit of an oversight in my view, but anyway, you're spending resources, and it's that classic Stonemaier thing that you see in games such as Scythe, where imagine you've got lots of dials and you're fiddling with them to get the optimum amount that works for you. And every time I play it, I do something slightly different. I might want to be more aggressive and focus on military, or I might want to actually focus more on, say, technology. And it's quite nice because you have to really think about that process, and it's not engine building per se, but there's something quite nice about using the limited resources you've got to try and last as long in a particular age, because a bit like Pendulum, really, everyone's running this game at a different time stream. So if I'm really good, I can make my resources last really long. So my age will last a little bit longer than, say, somebody else around the table. I've played games of Tapestry where one person has nearly finished their second age while the other person is not quite finished their first age, just because of the choices they've made. And it's really interesting kind of process in that regard. And what I like is each of these 4 different tracks give you slightly different bonuses. So for technology, I grab technology cards and I invent stuff, and that gives me bonuses. If I'm exploring, there's a map in the center of the board. I can get navigation tiles, which I can kind of place on the board, and that can expand my reach across this map. If I focus on military, I can conquer other people's territories. Or if I fancy a bit of chance, I can roll the science die, focus along that track, which is like, there's chance discoveries in science, and suddenly I can make a leap forward in another one of those 3 advancement tracks. And as you're moving along these tracks, you unlock things along the way. I can get buildings which I can put on my little capital city board. So there's another map that each player has. And when I first played this game, I was quite put off by the fact there's a lot of moving parts here. A lot of moving parts. Big map in the centre that everyone's working on, then everyone's got their own separate little map. There's a little puzzle there, there's a little puzzle there in the centre. But actually it's one of those games that the more I play it, the more I really enjoy it, because I realise that actually the whole point of this game is not to do everything. You're not trying to do all of it. That's the totally wrong way to play this game, because you realise your civilization cannot advance with everything on max for science, technology, military and exploration. It just doesn't work. You've got to pick at least 2 of them and focus on them. And part of the joy of this game, which has led to its expansion, is that variability. And to give that little bit of spice, you have those variable player powers, and these are your civilization cards. You have them at the very beginning, and it's basically everyone has a different agenda with theirs.
I was just going to say, like, how how unique, how much flavour do you get with each civilization? Does each player get like a different one? And this is like, oh, these are the tough, aggressive guys, and these are like the nerdy science people. Like, is it like when you get dealt your card at the start, it's very clear of like, you should be going down the science route, or you should be going down the military route?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, definitely. Yeah. And there's tons of them already in the base game. There's tons of them, and the expansion adds more. It adds more buildings, and it really does make you think a lot more about in terms of how you want to play the game. Add on top of that at the end of each era, you play what's called a tapestry card, because the premise of this game is, what story are you going to tell for your civilization?
Okay. I like that.
And each era is a tapestry, and they go really far-reaching. So there's you could play one card which is called like the Dark Ages, where essentially, if memory serves me correct, you advance one track but reduce on 3 of the others. Basically, your era's gone into the Dark Age, and you have to make that decision there. Or you play another one, which is socialism. So it's basically almost as a tapestry card for every single political ideology, or social political kind of structure. And it's genuinely really interesting. There's like the industrialist, there's those that are heavily capitalist, heavily militarized. And you kind of get a tapestry card at the very beginning, and you'll draw a tapestry card at the end of each round, but you may pick up more cards on the way. And it's great because you can create a very unique and quite unconventional era or history of your civilization, and it's really quite fun going back and tracking forward the decisions you've made. It's one of those few games where afterwards we spend a little bit of time discussing what each player did and how we got there. We tell that story, which is lovely.
I was just going to say, it sounds like, and what the expansion is doing is kind of bringing more stories to the table, because it's kind of like, that's why Cosmic Encounter is my favourite game, is the fact that with every expansion, all it's giving you is different aliens who act and behave in a certain way, and get you to ask questions about how are you going to play and how are you going to interact with the other players, rather than how are you going to win, how are you going to beat the other players down, like all that kind of stuff. Like, I really like it when a game comes out with something or does something that encourages more of those sort of diplomatic skills and those things that encourage like narrative and like story on top of a game.
Yeah, and it does so more so than Scythe, definitely. Like, I prefer this to Scythe. I know a lot of people don't, and Tapestry, a lot of people are uneasy about it, but I think that's generally people who play a lot of Civ games, because this does some things a little bit unusual. So usually civilization games tend to pride themselves on a tech tree that is logical. There's a neat kind of clear linear line, and it makes logical sense as you progress from one bit to the other.
So like discovering the moon before you discover penicillin or whatever.
And it's funny you say that. You do go into space in this game. If you get very far across the navigation track, you unlock space tiles and stuff, and there's like, if you can unlock the building for the space station, which you can put on your board. So you're actually building a town, and with the 3D, these beautiful sculpts by Ron Brown, you do feel like you've got like a town on there, which is great. And it's a mini game in itself. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's one of those few games that has grown on me more and more, because you know what it is when you're playing the same game with the same group of people.
Yeah.
There's not that much prevarication, and actually you're just enjoying what other people are doing. It's not about the competition. It's like, oh my gosh, you're playing that, because as you say, lots of the stuff is predicated on being where other people are. So, I might not be able to invent a technology card unless somebody, it doesn't have to be me, somebody has got to that particular stage on that advancement track. So you're very much playing what other people are doing to do certain things. And so much of these civilization cards are predicated on, say, copying what someone else has done, or sticking a cube on somebody else's tile, so when they unlock that, you get that bonus as well. So it's actually really, it's not like, this is my civilization, don't touch it, I've got my own little project. You're actually very much engaged with that. And it's not an overly thematic game, but the art is gorgeous. The components are wonderful. And it's just requiring you to have that little bit of imagination to really kind of want to kind of lose yourself in this, what is a treat, really. And the expansion's lovely. It adds a little thing. There's lovely attention to detail things that Stonemaier do very well. There's even stuff there that you don't really need, but it's lovely that it's there. And like, what I mean by that is
board games.
No, there's like these little markers that you can put. So when you unlock a building, you can take that marker away so it's very clear that that building is now gone and somebody else has taken it. You don't necessarily need that because you can just look around the table to see where that building is. But the bag is very nice. The thing I love is just seeing these new civilizations there. You're thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to be great. Because when you pick them at random, it's really nice to be forced to kind of play and, you know, to not just develop the same habit and win the same you won last time.
Yeah.
You can't repeat what you did before. So it becomes this wonderful epic combination log. And it's generally one of my favourite games from Stonemaier. And I think this expansion, it's really nice. It's a compact little box, unassuming, and it comes with lovely sculpts and miniatures. And it's just really lovely.
My test of a good expansion is, does it all fit in the original box?
Yeah, that's the thing, it doesn't. Just because it being Stonemaier, a bit like Wingspan, you've got this immaculate kind of insert for all of the different miniatures, so you can't add this in there, unfortunately. But it's really, it doesn't take up much shelf space. It's a really lovely game and generally surprising. But what I would say is that you'll be turned off it probably on your first game because it's quite overwhelming. There is so many moving parts in it. But in the same way that when you're playing Root, you're not playing all the factions of Root at the same time.
Yeah.
But just pick 2 advancement tracks and just focus on that, really, and enjoy the fact that the next game you'll do what you didn't do this time round. There's plenty for you to play here. It's just wonderful. We're getting into the spooky month, and I was just wondering, I mean, I know what Pete's views on Halloween are anyway, but like, I was just wondering whether we're feeling particularly spooky at the moment, or has all the horror been used up already in 2020?
I think I've made my feelings around Halloween quite clear in the past.
Yes.
If there was an Ebenezer Scrooge for Halloween, his name would be Daniel Frost.
Yes, and I would be joining you for that. I would be...
You could be Jacob Marley.
Okay, I could be Jacob Marley. I'd be Jacob Marley then.
Yeah. I've learned my bitterness from you.
Yeah, it's good though, because I hate Halloween. I think it's spooky and it frightens me.
Oh, I dislike it for a different reason then. I dislike it just purely for its commercialism nonsense, and it actually means nothing.
Kris, let me tell you what I do celebrate around this period of time, because it is important.
Other than your birthday, which you've already spoken about.
Other than my birthday. I do celebrate something called Falloween.
Right.
So Falloween is a special holiday that Alex and I made up because she really loves Halloween, and I really don't. The original Odd Couple. But what we really like is autumn, because we were like, look, we love autumn. We love squashes. We love leaves falling. We love turning the radiators on. We love all of those things.
I've just got this image of like Pete going for a walk in the park and a couple of leaves fall down and he just starts dancing in the leaves as they tumble from the sky, singing at the top of his voice.
Do you get like a B-list celebrity to turn your radiator on every year?
Yeah, basically, like the main thing that we do is, you know, we try and push as much as we can to make sure that we don't have to put the heaters on, but as soon as those heaters go on, we're like, oh, 'tis the season. And so Falloween is I've allowed cute spoopy, so like basically like spooky cute, like so for example, ghosts, but they're like, you know, little sheets and they got little smiles on their face and they're eating cookies. So that's allowed. And Alex has been like, fine, and she's pushed for that. That's where we've had to compromise. But what we both love is having like pumpkin pie, and pumpkin seeds. Have you ever had toasted pumpkin seeds?
Yeah, I've just made my second pumpkin pie actually already this month.
I hope you don't throw those seeds out.
No, I always toast them. Bit of paprika,
toast those seeds. Beautiful.
Salt and pepper.
Because there's some great food. There's some great drink.
I've never had pumpkin pie.
Oh, Dan.
I've never eaten pumpkin pie. I've never eaten toasted pumpkin seeds. I've never made a pumpkin, a Halloween pumpkin.
Oh, a Halloween pumpkin, right? Yeah.
So is it Falloween as in a holiday that follows Halloween, or is it Falloween as in the season of fall, as our kind of American friends may call it?
It's the latter.
Because Autumn-oween doesn't sound quite as good.
Yeah, like we workshopped it for a good 3 days to figure out what the best name would be, but
Can I is it just the case that you don't like getting scared, Pete? You don't get that pleasing terror that M.R. James talks about when getting scared.
I hate it. I like horror.
Yeah.
But I don't like being scared.
I can't stand the sensation of being scared. Pete, me and you have talked before, and I still think it's a great idea for a podcast of having a podcast where you just talk about what happens in a scary film because you've read it, as opposed to actually watching that scary film. Just reading out a plot synopsis for a scary film.
Should we do another one this time around? Like maybe we can make it like a tradition or something. What's the latest horror movie that everyone's talking about?
There's The Haunting of Bly Manor on Netflix. I'm not sure if that's a...
I've nearly finished watching The Haunting of Hill House, which is actually genuinely really good. It's really, really good. There's some... Because for me, a good ghost story is one where the ghost's objective is very clear. They're not just scaring the characters for the sake of scaring them. There's a reason. There's a kind of a method in the madness, really. And those, for me, stay with me longer because, there's a real clear emotional objective here. And The Haunting of Hill House, at the moment, is shaping up to be a really, really good example of that, really.
So I've just finished reading all of Lovecraft's written work. In terms of fiction. So I've read all of the work where he had the byline, and I've read all of his ghost writing, where he wrote for people like Harry Houdini and for his with his wife and a bunch of other really interesting people. So I've read all of his work now, which is quite exciting. And I love cosmic horror. I love the kind of horror that you get in the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, where it kind of rocks what you're thinking about. I like Silent Hill. I like things where I get to the end of something and it lingers with you and sits with you for ages and you think about it. It's very smart. What I don't like is like that's like to me that's sort of
jump
like,
scares.
Yeah, like jump scares. Don't like that. So like again, I reread Dracula earlier this year. Amazing. Reread Frankenstein, love that, fantastic. But I couldn't deal with stuff like Stephen King because it's just like, and then the blood and the gore it was gross.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think so many times a film or a book or something, the goal of it is to scare you as opposed to make you think. So certain horror films in recent years, I'm thinking about things like Get Out, is probably a horror film. But it actually kind of it's more about the ideas the film is putting forward rather than be scared, hide behind the sofa kind of thing. Maybe that's more of a thriller than a horror, but I think it would definitely fall into that genre. But those things I don't mind as much. But I just hate the feeling of being scared. I don't know why someone would seek that feeling out. There's a reason you're scared. No. It's because something bad is happening. That is not that's not something to seek out.
Your body's saying, this is bad, leave this.
Yes.
Be away from here.
Fear is the fight or flight thing. It's not fight or flight or stick around and see what happens.
But do you not like the idea of that feeling of kind of like testing, occasionally seeing actually, this is where I check out and this is where I'm okay, that's too much for me kind of thing.
That's where my strategy of reading a synopsis comes in, because it allows me to watch that film with the safety net that I don't have that because I know what's going to happen.
So for example, let's start. So I'm not going to spoil the whole thing because I don't want to, but I'm going to. This is how I would envisage our podcast, Dan, where we read out the plot synopsis from Wikipedia of movies. This is how I imagine it would sound.
Okay.
So the way that this would work is hello, and basically there would be a chiptune intro because all the bad podcasts have chiptune intros. Basically, hello and welcome to Dan and Pete's podcast about bad movies and reading out the plots of movies. We'd come up with a better title than that.
I'm Dan and he's Pete.
Hello. And are you ready to get spooky today, Dan?
I'm always ready to get spooked with you, Peter.
Fantastic. And now a word from our sponsors, and then it'd be something about mattresses or something, or maybe something about that body grooming shaver that keeps getting advertised to me on YouTube.
Everything. It's extraordinary.
For too long, men have gone without grooming.
Yeah. So let's see whether or not, Kris. Let's see whether or not this sort of jives with you. So. Photographer Adam Stanheight awakens in a bathroom with his ankle chained to a pipe. Across the room is oncologist Dr. Lawrence Gordon. Between them is a corpse holding a revolver and a micro-cassette recorder. Both men find a tape in their pockets and Adam retrieves the recorder. Adam's tape urges him to escape, while Gordon's tape tells him to kill Adam by 6 o'clock, or his wife Alison and daughter Diana will be killed.
Adam finds a bag containing 2 hacksaws inside the toilet, which they then try to use to cut through their chains. But Adam's saw breaks. Gordon realises the saws are meant to be used on their feet and identifies their captor as the Jigsaw Killer, a serial killer who tests his victims' will through murderous contraptions as games. Gordon knows of the Jigsaw Killer because he was once a suspect.
Ooh,
I'm loving this. I'm loving this Jackanory tone of voice.
so I think that would be pretty good. And then we'd put again mid-roll for an advert, and then we just finish off what the plot was.
I mean, I love the fact that you were really worried about spoiling a film that's 16 years old. I mean, I saw this at uni. I saw this when we were at uni, and there's been about 6 of them since then.
I really like this idea, Pete. I think this could be big.
Okay, I think this, unlike Adam and Lawrence, I think this has legs, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we get 10,000 subscribers, me and Pete will make an episode of this.
As you may have spotted, or cared about the last few weeks or whatever, I've been going down a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, go on.
About solitaire gaming.
Oh, we've reached that level of age.
We've reached this level
I
of
see.
age where I'm looking around of someone to play with, and I'm just like, you know that gif of John Travolta in that Quentin Tarantino movie where he's like,
Well, here's the thing. You've gone down one of the 3 potential routes of tabletop gaming.
Oh, okay. What are the 3? So
basically, when you get to a certain age, we've talked about 2 of them before. You get to a certain age, and you go down the solitaire gaming route. Mm-hmm. You go to or at the same time, you decide that you know what, historical games, they will be the things that I will become interested in. And then the third one is you go, I don't want to do this anymore at all, and you sell your entire collection, only to come back in about a decade and wish you hadn't sold that rare copy of Mage Knight. There's
your tech tree.
That is the board gamer getting older tech tree.
Okay. Well, I've got no kind of interest in historical games.
Not yet.
I'm definitely keeping most of my collection. So solitaire it is.
There we are.
Which is something that I've had a bit of an interest in anyway, because as you know, my other obsession is roll and write games.
I've never heard you talk about roll and write games, Sam.
I know. Well,
not even once.
Let me explain what one of those is. So most of them can be played solitaire, and I guess part of it comes from my grandpa was the first person to teach me a card game. He taught me clock solitaire. And we used to, I say we, which is me on my own.
But this has all the makings of a Werther's original advert.
Yeah, and so he would just generally, I'd go around his house with my grandma, she was there too, and give me a deck of cards, and I'd sit there for hours playing clock solitaire. And
to be fair, I used to play that. I called it clock patience, but I used to play that.
What's clock solitaire?
So clock solitaire is, there's a general genre of games which are called solitaire games or patience games. Solitaire is probably the most well known, which is the game where you're essentially trying to organise a randomised deck of cards back into order again. It's essentially what you're doing. In clock solitaire, you do it basically in a clock face. And so you have 12 different stacks of 4 cards and then a pack of cards and then the other 4 cards in the middle. And so you'll draw a card from the middle of the deck. If it's a 1, you put it underneath where the 1 sits on a clock. You take the top card off the 1, and then So say that's a 6, you'll then put that underneath a 6 and take the top card off a 6 and then keep on going until you pull a king. Because obviously there's only 12 numbers. So if you're pulling a king, that goes nowhere. So that goes underneath the middle of the deck. And then you pull a card off the middle of the deck and you carry on going until either you've completed all of the clock or you've picked the last card up off the middle of the deck. That's clock solitaire or clock patience. It's good. It's a cracker.
Okay.
It's a cracker. I mean, I have bought David Parlett's book on patience games, and I was a bit peeved about it because my mic rests on, for most of this recording, this huge compendium of the Penguin card games written by David Parlett. Everything you need to know to play over 250 games. Does it include any solitaire ones?
No.
Separate book.
Yeah,
expansion.
The expansion. That's how they get you, innit?
So I'm going to start working my way through that book because I thought like I can carry on like just playing roll and writes on my own, or let's actually go down a bit of a rabbit hole with card games. But yeah, so yeah, I've just been playing lots of games on my own. So I recently played Metro X, which is a flip and write game. So that's like a roll and write, but you're doing it with cards.
Right. Okay.
So we've all played Welcome to.
Right.
Yes, we have.
So it's the same thing, you're flipping over things and filling in boxes. And Metro X is really, really interesting. I played a couple of rounds on my own today. And the idea of the game is that you'll get given this map and it looks like the kind of metal spaghetti that when you first go to London or you first go to any city that's got a metro system that you've never been to before, you look at it and go, I'm never going to... What? I'm never going to work this out.
I can't get home now.
Yeah, yeah. Like when Lisa and I went to New York, we looked at the sort of the metro system there, the subway, and we were so daunted by it. We spent most of our time going around New York on the drop off tour bus pack that we bought. So whenever we wanted to get anywhere, we'd get on, hear the same things over and over again about this is the Statue of Liberty and this is the Iron Building and all this kind of stuff just to get to where we want to go because we just were so daunted by the subway. And incidentally, sorry, tangent. The one time we did get the subway, we were all the way up in Harlem, which if you've ever been to New York is basically north of Central Park. So you've got Manhattan, like Central Park, and then there's Harlem right at the top. So we went to Harlem to go and have some soul food. And it was really, really late. So we thought, we'll get the subway back, just risk it. Subway was closed for maintenance. So we had to walk the entire length of Central Park to get back to our hotel room.
Oh, my word.
It's a lovely memory now, but at the time it was...
But at the time it was,
daunting.
Yeah.
So Metro X is a flip and write game that kind of captures a bit of that sense of what it's like to try and navigate your way through these like colourful byways and highways of an underground metro system. Essentially all you do is you're flipping over cards, it will give you a number, and then you've got to write that number in a little train, and then you've got to like cross off that many stops on basically where this train will be going. And it's really, really interesting because I was playing it and I immediately had a flashback to when I was living in London. And after I'd been in London for several months, you kind of have this feeling where you feel like you've mastered the underground. And if someone tells you like, oh, how do I get to there? You're just like, watch this. Right, you're going to take that train and you're going to move over to there and then you're going to get to this platform and go down there, and that's how you're going to get to where you need to be. And that feeling of being able to master a sort of industrial cosmopolitan system is exceptionally satisfying, and Metro X kind of simulates that in a way in how it asks you to build points and arrange the stations that you're crossing off. It's that same kind of way of, right, look at this map. I'm starting here and I need to get here. How can I do that in the most economical way possible? And it's really, really like I've not felt like that about a game before in terms of how it replicates a sort of that like modern sort of mapping like structure of like a. It's really interesting that it's like it's called Metro X, and I thought it was just like, oh, this is just like they've called it this because all these lines look pretty, but it actually is really like it seems really embedded, like that untangling of a modern city metro system into a roll and write game. Like it's super interesting.
Understanding systems is like a huge part of the appeal for a lot of games, right? Like, like actually figuring out how different pieces interconnect with one another. What happens when you take one input and put it in this place, and take that same input and put it in another? How does that actually change the sort of meta structure of how you approach that game? I tell you what, though, these look like some very good pens.
The pens are incredible.
Really,
the marker pens are incredible because it's all about the nib. So they do the marker pens do two things that I really like.
Okay.
So
write
the
and
common
erase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the common design at the moment for roll and write dry white markers is you'll have a thin white pen, and then they give you a really thick top that's wider than the actual pen itself, and is a bit of a nuisance because the top flicks off really easily because there's like it's like the weight compensation is a bit too much, so you end up like flicking the erasers on the table, and getting them back into the box is a bit tricky. However, with Metro X, the eraser is actually only slightly bigger than the pen itself, so there's a bit of a good better weight distribution throughout the pen itself, and the the nib is pointed, so it's not like a rounded nib. So it means that like you've actually got a bit of the finesse you need when it comes to like writing in and like doing stuff on the board. So yeah, in terms of like, if I was to do roll and write reviews, this would be getting top marks for its pen design.
Yeah. I do think as a roll and write aficionado, having a T-shirt saying it's all about the nib.
It's all about the nibs. I mean, nothing quite beats the pens that you get in copies of Silver and Gold and Quicks.
That was more time spent, even though it wasn't that long. It felt like a lifetime talking about pen nibs.
Hey man.
And
the nib to eraser ratio.
Yeah, it's important.
The erasio.
I feel like roll and writes have stopped being games for you, Sam. I feel like they've become a hobby.
Yeah, possibly. And I think it's because that they are so flexible in terms of, I have roll and writes like, so Welcome to can play up to 99 players, like it, and like
it's a good lockdown game as well to play remotely.
And it's a great lockdown game. And I've like Metro X is 6 players, but it's also 1, and I feel like they fill a space for me where there's a personal challenge, but there's also a group challenge in most of them. However, even though I feel that way with most roll and writes, even though all of them, there is one which I feel like pretty much is the only one I would only ever play solo, and I'd only ever recommend ever playing it on your own. And that's Super Skill Pinball : 4K'd. Okay?
Sorry, I feel like I had an aneurysm there. What is the... So, it's...
Super Skill...
So there's a dash in there, so there's a super dash skill. Super skill.
There's 2 dashes. Super dash skill Pinball.
4 dash K'd.
Yeah. And it's the number 4, numerical 4.
Right.
Okay.
And okay. Yeah.
So this is the brand new game from Geoff Engelstein, who is a board game designer who is, I don't want to say obsessed, but he's very extremely knowledgeable about the mathematics behind games. He has a book called Gametek, which is all about the mathematics behind board game. He's very, very interested in things like game theory. He's got a book coming out in soon, I think, about like how to design your own game. Kris and I have lots of fun getting beaten every single time at playing one of his games called Pit Crew. And yeah, his games tend to have this like wonderful heft behind them of like this knowledge that he seems to possess, in terms of like he's extremely knowledgeable about the theory behind board games. He also does lots of stuff on the Ludology podcast, so he does like Gametek things on that, like, and I've listened to whole podcasts of Geoff Engelstein talking about like bag building games and what it takes to break them and make them. Like it's incredibly interesting, and like talking about ratios and division and like if you like that kind of stuff, Jeff's your man.
Right. Okay. Good.
So So Super Skill Pinball 4K is a roll and write game, but it's also a pinball simulator. So we all know what pinball machines are. They're things that sit in the back of pubs. And when I was a kid, I never understood them. I just thought you just press the flippers in, loads and loads and loads and loads and loads. Oh, the ball's gone down.
They were so much fun, though. So much fun.
But I never realised why they were fun until we went to...
It was in Bury.
We went to Bury, yes. And we went to the arcade there, which had a row upon row of pinball tables that you could play for free. And they were all franchised, like Addams Family, Simpsons, X-Files. And it was only when I played on the pinball table there that I realised what the attraction was. Because it was the only time I really had a bit more of an understanding of the grammar behind games. So I understood that, like, all right, well, if I hit this thing with a pinball, I'm going to get extra points if I then are able to hit that thing. Or if I'm able to get the pinball to sit up at that point of the table, I'm going to get more points for it being there. And maybe if I can get the pinball to go over this way of the table, I could get a multi-ball and score even more points. And that was kind of like the moment where kind of like, oh, I understand what the attraction with these things are now. This wonderfully tactile and responsive game.
Yeah, I think when you're young, you just want to keep the ball in play for as long as possible. That's the whole aim of the game.
That's the skill in it. Is you don't. I think when you're young, you're absolutely right, Dan. It's about longevity rather than the actual, like, how can you control the ball and what can you do to score much points you can. Super Skill Pinball 4K. Let's not bury the lead. I genuinely think this is the best solo game I have ever played.
Okay.
I have had so much fun with this game. So much fun that I've actually sort of like divvied up the copy that Wizkids kindly sent us and sent all the boards and all the pinballs and everything you need to play to both you Peter, and you, Kris. Because I thought that, like, especially you, Peter, this is kind of, I thought that, like, this would be in your wheelhouse in terms of, like, how do you turn a very tactile and physical experience into a board game, and how is that reflected on the sheet?
I've got it here.
Go on.
So, first of all, excellent pen. Very good.
Yeah,
looking.
but you can see the top of that pen is the eraser
Very
is
thick.
too big.
Very
Yeah,
thick.
too big.
I will say this about the boards. They look like really fun pinball tables. You know, the whole thing is laid out really beautifully, like, you know, as if you were looking at a pinball table. You know, it's sort of like portrait. I can see there's like so much color and like little bumpers and stuff like that. Things that really do represent pinball pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, so as the name suggests, in the box you get 4 different tables. So you get the tables themselves, and then you also get, like, the backs for each table.
Right.
Where you can, like, just like in a real pinball table, that's what would track your score. That maybe is where you, like, track your bonuses and all this kind of stuff. So when you play each game, you'll have the front plate, the actual game board, and then you'll have the back, which is where you kind of track your score. And the game is very simple. You'll roll 2 dice, you'll pick one result, and then using that result, you'll basically direct this small silver ball to hit a certain thing as it's falling down. And it might be a bumper, it might be a little drop zone, it might be a marker, until it hits the flippers, and then you send the ball flinging back up, and then it bounces down until eventually you lose all your balls, and it's how many points you score. And I absolutely love it. I think it's incredibly tactile. It really feels like it genuinely captures that feeling of control over something that feels uncontrollable. Like, rolling dice is a completely random affair, and like how a silver ball behaves in a pinball is also an incredibly random affair. But this really, like, captures that feeling of I can master this. Like, I can really feel like I can control where this ball goes, what I can activate to give myself the best bonuses, and what can I do to really, like, eke out all the best from this specific table that I'm playing. Like, absolutely, it's so good. And like, that's why I love it as a solo experience, because, like, that feeling of, like, juggling a ball like that tactile movement of like moving this thing around. I feel like if you were playing with other people, it'll be something that's slightly lost, because it feels just like when you're playing a pinball table in real life, it feels like a very personal, a very individual thing. And I feel like sharing that is a little bit odd. And also, if you're not very good or not very lucky, it's quite common that you'll just drop out the game while someone else is still like juggling the balls around and like still going. You're just sat there just like waiting for them to finish, so then you can like throw another ball in and carry on.
Because I think theme is like incredibly important with these things. Like, do you feel like the theme was one that you were looking for in the first place anyway, or is it just that it matched up nicely?
I was super skeptical about if it would actually work,
right?
Because my little experience with pinball is so minimal, but it's always felt like a very noisy, very sort of hard-hitting and visceral experience. Like, that's the whole point, is they're meant to be things that draw a crowd over and stimulate sort of like that dopamine hit of like high score, yeah, bang, 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 bing, 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 bing. So I was super skeptical that this would be able to pull it off. And I think it does in spades, and I think it's helped by the variety in the pinball tables themselves. So the first one is called Carniball, and it's very, very simple. You're just basically flinging a ball around. There's a few like extra bonuses that you can trigger, like multi-ball and double points. Very, very simple. But then as you move on up, the next one is about it's like a cyber hacking table, and it's actually got a thing in it which, like, as you're playing the pinball table, you can do things that trigger basically like hack points, and then if you're able to get the ball into the right places, you can then trigger a mini game which becomes like a push your luck hacking mini game, and essentially where you're trying to hack into this corporation by rolling dice and seeing how far you can get before like essentially the corporation are able to like catch up with you. The other table after that, which I haven't played yet, but it's the one that I'm most looking forward to, is essentially an RPG where you play as a wizard, and you start off with level 1 spells, and then as the game goes on, you basically like level up, and you can like cast spells, and you can cast like cantrips as this pinballing wizard, a literal pinballing wizard, and you essentially like act out an RPG but through a pinball table. And it's like that ingenuity and interesting imaginative design that has always been at the forefront of pinball tables, and I think that's probably the thing that really carries it through in terms of like how it pulls off that theme, is that it goes like, pinball tables are wicked crazy, yo, so there's no other reason why this shouldn't be as crazy and as varied and interesting in its experience.
Because I think I agree, Sam, it does capture that sense, and as soon as I was playing the game, it took me back to being in Bury. It took me back to that Microsoft Windows pinball game. And actually it was quite interesting to start off with. I played with this, because you get these half spheres, basically these half pinballs which act as the pinball on the board. I actually took that off because I was trying to capture that frenetic pace so much. I was just drawing the pen, and I really enjoyed just the trajectories of this.
That's cool.
There's also a really lovely nudge mechanic in there, which is a bit of a push your luck element. But again, it's that little detail that Geoff Engelstein puts in there it's not on the pinball, but it's something that we all do when we're playing. We kind of shove the thing a little bit. That's why they're so robust to these machines. And despite the fact that you're playing on what is a board, just having the nudge mechanic there feels like actually I can kind of tip the odds in my favour, but it doesn't allow that to tip the balance too much in your favour, because when you make that decision to nudge, then you're pushing your luck with subsequent dice rolls, really. And it's a really nice, elegant mechanic where you're not nudging all the time, but you know you've got that option there if you need to, really. It was just great fun. It was just giddy fun. And you're absolutely right.
I love it.
That theatrical experience of when you get the combination of the ball going in a particular bit, and suddenly a part of the level map, for want of a better word, just appears out of it. You go, oh my gosh, great, I'm going to zone in on that now. It sounds like he's done a wonderful job, a bit like Pit Crew, where he's kind of capturing, I suppose, the spirit of the activity.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I've been able to print these off. I think that's something that's actually really good about these. I think the two of the tables that you mentioned there, Sam, Carnival and Cyberhack, are both available to be downloaded for free. So you can download them, you can print them off, or I don't know, have them on a tablet, and it kind of gives you all the instructions as well as a board for you to play. And I think that's really good that you can kind of get such easy access to it. And we've talked quite a lot about roll and write games and flip and write games on this podcast. Obviously, Sam, you're kind of, some would say obsessed, some would say no, it's a hobby of yours. Either
The
or.
Grandmaster.
One of those. What I would say is that I was thinking, as you were discussing it then, talking about pinball and how, I was thinking about how weird is it to turn a pinball machine into a board game which works and captures the idea of the pinball. And I feel like it's almost like a conversation we've had in the past about roll and write games. We've had roll and write games which kind of represent, like, do the same thing as Tetris does, and there's different games which do different things. And is there kind of a type of game which is more flexible than a roll and write? Because we've played, I mean, you talk there, within this one game of pinball, you're playing basically an RPG. Are there any other types of games which are more adaptable than roll and write, kind of that genre of games? The amount of stuff that we've talked about, and we've probably still only scratched the surface of what's possible. But I can't think of anything that has such a diverse kind of type of game.
In terms of themes and representing things in the world, I would say that role-playing games are probably pretty high up there, but that's quite a large genre.
I'd say probably deck building games are
maybe
the thing that probably is used quite commonly to represent quite a lot of things and systems of how they play, like from city building to managing an army to scavenging in the wild or galactic space battles.
Dan is right though, and I think maybe one of the reasons that it's so flexible is because essentially these roll and write games are essentially, if you can boil something down to put numbers into this and put numbers into that, like that, I mean, that is basically the core of so many things in the world, but that is also kind of like one of the intrinsic mechanics of something like a roll and write. Whereas you look at something like I don't know, like an abstract strategy game, for example, and that's about positioning. That's about and not all things in the world, like growing plants, isn't really a thing that you can make a strategy game out of. Whereas, like, you could see how you would do a roll and write on growing plants, because it's like, I put this amount of number of this, I don't know, like...
there is a roll and write game called Bloom.
Right, well, there you go. I
mean, Kris and I played a roll and write the other day called Roman Roll, which is essentially a Euro game, but with a roll and write at its centre.
It's interesting, isn't it?
That's incredible. And I feel like I'll probably speak about that another time, because it's a genuinely interesting experience in terms of, like, here's a really, really crunchy and really heavy Euro and complicated experience, but it's a roll and write game. Here's your sheet. We're rolling dice. We're filling stuff in. That's it. But yeah,
are we at the point, Sam?
Yeah.
And by we, I mean
of
you.
no return.
Well, we're long gone beyond that. Are you at the point, Sam, where you've gone from a passing interest in roll and write to I enjoy these games of roll and write to roll and write is now a hobby for me? Do you feel like you're going to take this one step further and start, because the natural progression of getting into the hobby is, could I do this myself? Is there a little inkling in you where you're just like, I'd love to do a roll and write about the history of late 80s hip hop, or I'd love to do a roll and write about I don't know, like Stoic philosophy, or I'd love to do a roll and write about looking after nervous dogs, or I'd like to do a roll and write about redecorating the house, or I'd like to do a roll and write about football, or I'd like to do a roll and write about filling my house with board games, or I'd like to do a roll and write about cooking nice vegan food, or like to do a roll and write about roll and writes. About a person that goes through, oh, wow, okay. It's a game about you playing every roll and write in the world.
I mean, I could try.
That was Staying In with Daniel Frost, Sam Turner, Peter Willington and myself, Kris Darby. It's been pretty tabletop heavy this episode, and many thanks to Stonemaier Games, Coiledspring Games and Wizkids Games for very kindly sending us review copies of, you guessed it, their games. All of the games discussed in this episode will be in our Board Game Geek profile, along with the extensive list of all the others we have covered over our previous 114 episodes. If you have your own views on what would make a good roll and write, or want to invest in Pete and Dan's awful idea for a podcast, why not let us know via the usual means? Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. @StayingInPod is all you need to reach us there. Feel free to join the conversation and ask us a question via these platforms, or just email us at stayinginpod@gmail.com. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.